Australians are more concerned about illegal immigration than Americans, according to a new survey. The US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney, in conjunction with Stanford University, found that 76% of Australians believe increasing numbers of asylum seekers and illegal immigrants are an important problem. Only 71% of Americans believe it's important, with a nation estimated 11 million illegal immigrants. Here to discuss the survey is CEO of the US Studies Centre, Professor Geoffrey Garrett. Professor Garrett, thanks for your time. Now, when you hear Australians are more concerned about illegal immigration than Americans are, it's surprising. Why do you think it is?
Yeah, it's obviously a complex question. I think we have to look at partisan politics as being an important part of the story. But at the end of the day, it probably is because in the United States, most of the undocumented migrants are Latinos. They're crossing the border with Mexico, but they're crossing the border into a country where there are more than 30 million Latinos living legally. So finding a path to legal status for Mexicans in the US is a big issue. Contrast that with Australia, where asylum seekers is really an issue about border security. There's no constituency within the country here that wants to find a legal path to residency in Australia for them.
But we also have a situation where Australians are more concerned about our legal migrant intake than Americans are. So is that a different issue?
No, they certainly seem to be conjoined, and that's, I think, also a really interesting finding in our survey. Americans still tend to look at immigration as part of the solution more than the problem. It's a solution because it helps you with an ageing population, brings new skills into the country. As we know, in Australia, there are concerns about overcrowding in big cities, other concerns that just don't seem to be relevant in the US. So we have, on both dimensions, Australians being more concerned about immigration than Americans.
They're powerful political issues in both countries, though, aren't they?
They are, but our polling shows that in the United States, there are real incentives for Barack Obama and the Democrats to resist Republican efforts to get tough with illegal immigration. Whereas in Australia, it seems it goes the other way, that the coalition has a natural advantage, and therefore we'd conclude that what's happened in the election campaign is that Julia Gillard's tried to neutralise the issue by moving Labor policies closer to where the coalition is.
So there's potential political advantage for Barack Obama to take a more small L liberal approach and fight this apparent racism. Whereas
yes,
in Australia there isn't.
Yeah, and there are two important instances of that in the US at the moment. One is that Barack Obama took Arizona to court over having what he wanted to view as unconstitutional restrictions on illegal immigration, and he won in court. And now there's a move by Republicans to say that you can't be a natural American citizen just because you're born in the country if your parents were illegal, and the Democrats are resisting that as well. And it looks like it might play well for them in the November midterm elections.
It hasn't worked for President Obama, though, to take a position on the mosque to be built not far from Ground Zero.
Yeah, the mosque is a really interesting issue. You have conservatives saying, listen, we wouldn't have a Holocaust museum. We wouldn't want Nazis visiting Holocaust museum. This is the same thing. The Liberals say, look, this is the worst possible thing you can do for the Muslim world, because what it says to the Muslim world is, we think all Muslims are responsible for terrorist attacks, not a tiny sliver of extremists.
Do you think Australia is a more racist country than America?
I don't think it's more racist, but again, an interesting thing we found in our survey is that Australians aren't so much concerned about the economic impact of illegal migrants as they are about broader cultural issues. So maybe that's a function of the fact that the Australian economy at the moment is doing so much better than the American, but it did stand out in our results.
What about the irony that both our political leaders, the Prime Minister and the opposition leader, were born outside of Australia?
And a fantastic irony, of course, and it's true that in both Australia and the US, about 25% of the population were born outside the country. So we're both multicultural societies in important respects, but the immigration issues do seem to be cleaving and playing a little differently in both countries at the moment.
Professor Garrett, we thank you for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.